evening. This is the news on NTA International. I am Lami Ali. Hannah Olainka is the sign language interpreter, and these are the leading stories. United Nations wants countries to phase out coal and other fossil fuels to avert a climate catastrophe. African leaders embark on peace mission in Kyiv to mediate and find lasting resolutions to Ukraine-Russia conflict. Plus, Nigeria, ECOWAS and 4 other African countries signed MOU on gas supply. Thank you for joining us. African leaders have embarked on a peace mission in Kyiv to mediate and find lasting resolutions to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Obiageli Ugoke reports that the African leaders, including South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and Senegalese President Macky Sall, began their trip by visiting the town of Abuja.
Kremlin invaded Ukraine in February 2022 and has played down the chances of peace talks with Kyiv. It says conditions for a peace process are not in place, but it is open to outside initiatives.
Very well, how are you? Nice to meet you.
A delegation of African leaders began a peace mission in Kyiv on Friday. They hope to mediate between Ukraine and Russia and bring an end to a war that has hit African countries by disrupting grain and other food supplies. The delegation, which consists of leaders from South Africa, Senegal, Zambia, the Comoros, and Egypt, met Defense Ministry representatives ahead of talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky. The South African president says the mission is proceeding well and as planned. The leaders are due to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg on Saturday. The team is undeterred by what Ukraine said is a volley of Russian missiles intended to greet them in the capital as 2 explosions rocked the capital. No deaths or big damage in the city, but emergency services said 4 people, including a child, were hurt in the Kyiv region. Obiageli Ugoke, NTA News.
And NATO defense ministers failed on Friday to reach an agreement over new plans on how the alliance would respond to a Russian attack. NATO promised to also give nations guidance on how to upgrade their forces and logistics. Again, Obiageli Ugoke brings us the details.
NATO defense ministers have reviewed the organization's defense plans for the first time since the end of the Cold War and given impetus by Russian invasion of Ukraine. Representatives of 26 defense companies from the US and Europe were invited to join the meeting in Brussels, where Turkey was represented by National Defense Minister Yasar Gola. The regional plans comprise thousands of pages of secret military plans that will detail how the alliance would respond to a Russian attack. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the drawing up of the document signifies a fundamental shift.
To this meeting of NATO defense ministers with President Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine, we face the most serious threat to Euro-Atlantic security for a generation. We currently have over 40,000 troops under direct NATO command, with many more on high alert.
During the talks, increasing production, ensuring supply chain continuity, and boosting cooperation were discussed. Ukraine and the EU were also among the participants of the meeting. NATO has seen no need for large-scale defense plans for decades, as it fought smaller wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and felt certain post-Soviet Russia no longer posed a threat. Obiageli Ugoke, NTA News.
Member states of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development are meeting in Kampala, the capital of Uganda, to find lasting solutions to the growing refugee crisis in the region amid dwindling funding. Let's get the details from Adebola Brooklyn Sunday.
Uganda hosts the biggest number of refugees in Africa. Observers say the country is struggling to cope with the overwhelming numbers. The 4-day ministerial meeting of IGAD member states is discussing alternative solutions for the refugee crisis. Donor funding is dropping as the international community turns its attention to other global crises. Aid agencies in Uganda say they need $137 million to meet the refugees' response for the next 6 months.
We need to find our own resources, which are plenty by on this continent, to be able to address our issues. Those who have their crises in Syria, their crises in Asia, of course the famous issues of Ukraine, they're paying more attention there.
Some delegates at the meeting suggested that resources should be redirected to livelihood projects. At present, refugees in Uganda are allowed to work and earn a living.
It doesn't pay at all keeping refugees in settlements and camps for years and feeding them for years. That is why we are advocating for an increase in livelihoods opportunities.
The World Food Programme has been forced to prioritize food rations to only those in most need due to a funding shortfall. Uganda has close to 1.6 million refugees and has kept its doors open to asylum seekers despite the growing numbers. Adebola, Brooklyn Sunday, NTA News.
Now, the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, has rescued 2 victims from a trafficking syndicate in Abuja. Adebola Brooklyn Sunday reports that the Director General of the agency, Professor Fatima Waziri Aziz, revealed this to newsmen while displaying items recovered from 2 perpetrators at the corporate headquarters of the agency.
2 female victims, ages 16 and 22, who were rescued few minutes before they were taken to the embassy, narrated their pathetic stories of how they were lured by the syndicates who forced them to swear an oath of allegiance in 2 different shrines located within Delta and Imo states. One of the victims also revealed that her very close friend, who was already trafficked to India, was subjected to having sex with a minimum of 10 men a day. A situation that obviously gave her sleepless nights before being rescued by operatives of NAPTIP.
There are links we are going to work with. We have phones, we have their phones, we have their handsets, we have laptops, we have documents we picked from that hotel. As we start to interrogate those devices, we will definitely come to a level where we know whether he's innocent or not. But for now, they are together. I know it is a clandestine business.
Professor Fatima Waziri said the syndicate specialize in trafficking young female Nigerians to India for sexual exploitation and possible organ harvesting. 6 African countries signed a memorandum of understanding on the gas supply under the Morocco gas pipeline project. The gas project has been described as an opportunity to monetize Nigeria's abundant hydrocarbon resources to support economic growth, industrialization and job creation across the African continent and beyond. Lydia Sampson brings us the details.
Trust Steering Committee meeting of Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline as enshrined by the Memorandum of Understanding executed in 2022 underscores the host governments, the ECOWAS Commission and the National Oil Company's resolve to deliver on the strategic project, create wealth and value for African countries and other stakeholders. Melikari says currently, FEED Phase 2 study is over 70% and the tendering process for the surveys, environmental and social impact assessment, as well as land acquisition and resettlement policy framework are on track with clear visibility into project funding.
The significant gas resources that is available in Nigeria, Senegal, and Mauritania, and a few other countries, and will now be pulled together by this pipeline network to connect all of us, make energy available to all of us.
Very happy to see that all the countries in this area of our continent are totally committed to the to implement this project because it will be for the benefit of our population, of our economy.
The study showed that the project is viable in terms of bankability. So now it's private sector that we are waiting to come to fund that project.
The member countries reiterates their unwavering commitment in executing responsibilities indicated in the Memorandum of Understanding, as well as challenges that may come up at implementation. In Abuja, Lydia Sampson, NTA News.
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warns that countries must phase out coal and other fossil fuels to avert climate catastrophe. He called for immediate global action towards net zero emissions, which must start with the polluted heart of the climate crisis, the fossil fuel industry. On NTA, Fine-Face reports.
In a meeting with civil society climate leaders from across the world, Guterres said limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius is still possible, but will require a 45% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. Current policies, he says, will lead to a 2.8 degrees Celsius temperature rise by the end of the century, which spells catastrophe.
Fossil fuel companies must also cease and desist influence peddling and legal threats designed to kneecap progress. I'm thinking particularly of recent attempts to subvert net zero alliances invoking antitrust legislations.
Guterres stressed that the fossil fuel industry should apply its massive resources to drive, not obstruct, the global transition to renewable energy. He wants fossil fuel companies to present credible, comprehensive and detailed new transition plans that include reducing emissions up and down the value chain, from production through to refining, distribution and use.
Governments are pivotal in setting the record straight. They must help by providing clear reassurance. Collective climate action does not violate antitrust, it upholds the public trust. At the same time, financial institutions must encourage this transformation of the fossil fuel industry.
The UN chief has previously proposed establishing a climate solidarity pact, under which rich nations would support emerging economies with cutting emissions. Another proposal for an acceleration agenda calls on governments to phase out coal by 2040, end public and private international coal funding, and shift subsidies from fossil fuels to renewables, among other measures. On NTA, Fine-Face, NTA News.
Moving from a crude to blue economy is an economic evolution Nigeria must tap into in its quest for economic diversification. Director General, Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NEMA, Bashir Jamu, said this as the June edition of the Lunchtime Reform Seminar organized by the Bureau of Public Service Reforms in Abuja. Adebola Brooklyn Sunday reports.
The blue economy refers to the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth to improve livelihoods and create jobs while preserving the health of ocean ecosystem. The future, observers say, lies in the blue economy, with Nigeria having a coastline boundary with the Atlantic Ocean from Badagry to Bakassi. The world is working hard to phase out the fossil fuel industry, and Nigeria must be aware of the danger ahead.
The issue of fishing used to be the second largest that provide income for the Nigerian economy. Now today everything, oil and gas, thrown them away. And now we are going back to square one. The oil and gas is becoming zero. When you look at our oil quota is 1.8 million barrels per day. Now we are getting to about 900, only half.
I think we have clearly seen today there is an alternative to providing employment, generate more money, and in the spirit of the New Hope agenda, to improve the GDP of Nigeria by accepting and embracing the blue economy.
Pollution arising from plastic wastes, security and safety are some areas of concerns raised by participants.
The seafarers have no issue on that anymore. They move within the water territory without any icing or plastic disturbances on the sea anymore.
The forum pointed the need for the provision of adequate and high-quality infrastructure, good governance and institutional reforms as crucial towards maximizing the blue economy. Adebola, Brooklyn Sunday, NTA News.
You're watching news at 7 on NTA International. Time now for a break. More stories when we return. To stay tuned.
Naija, your love guest.
I do believe in love at first sight.
I just think it's not possible.
You know, as a man, you're moved by what you see.
My love at first sight is a mental connection.
Personally, don't want someone really shorter than I am.
Guys really don't pick up on things like that sometimes, and I'm guys.
My goal, is to find love.
I just like them average, light skin.
My move button is just showing me too much love.
You might be the most beautiful woman in the world, but if your nails are not straight and clean, and doing with you.
Bad breath, bad odors of any kind.
I'm the mumu naturally, so...
I will be gone. I'll be a mumu for life.
I love attention, maybe food.
I want to try again.
If a woman is like my heaven, like she gives me peace, I'm good.
I was at the point of getting married, or my dad didn't approve of the relationship.
With me, my man.
I want someone that's a little bit taller than I am and muscular.
I think you actually have to know a person to a certain degree before you say you're in love with them.
We shall defend the nation from terror and all form of criminality that threaten the peace and stability of our country. Security shall be top priority of our administration because neither prosperity nor justice can prevail amid insecurity and violence.
Welcome back. The Federal High Court Oka Division has set aside its earlier judgments on the alleged illegality of the continued stay in office of the Inspector General of Police, Usman Alkali Baba. The presiding judge, Justice Roman, gave the order to set aside the verdict delivered on 19th May 2023. The judgments of the court followed the application filed by the Inspector General of Police through his counsel, challenging the earlier verdicts on the ground that he was not served, thus not heard in the suit, which was his constitutional right. The applicant argued that the suit was cut up by the principle of res judicata having been adjudicated upon based on the same issues and facts being canvassed by the plaintiff. The plaintiff, Okechukwu Nwafo, has instituted the suit as the Federal High Court, seeking a declaration that Usman Alkali Baba should vacate office after attaining the age of retirement. This verdict has nullified the earlier one. The United Nations Department for Disaster Risk Reduction is optimistic that with continued capacity building of the National Emergency Management Agency NEMA on disaster risk reduction, more resilience among the people would have been built to tackle the menace of flooding. Special Representative of the UN Secretary General on Disaster Risk Reduction, Mami Mizutori, stated this when she led the UN team to the headquarters of NEMA to further strengthen collaboration with the agency. Ilyasu Ali Yakubu reports.
Since 2015, the United Nations initiated the Disaster Risk Reduction Mechanism with the sole aim of preventing disasters before they occur. The initiative has an achievable target from 2015 to 2030. To this end, Countries across the globe have been making frantic efforts to change the narrative. This meeting between NEMA and the UN Department for Disaster Risk Reduction is to work out modalities to mainstream the strategies of disaster risk reduction mechanisms that will see to the actualization of maximally reducing the risks of disasters before their occurrence. The UN representative promised to work closely with NEMA in capacity building and provision of other technicalities that will build resilience among the Nigerian populace.
Risk is everybody's business, and it's a whole of society approach that can work.
Director General of NEMA, Mustafa Habib Ahmed, said the agency has been working round the clock to ensure that the risk of disasters is reduced to minimum level through the adherence of disaster risk reduction mechanism.
The federal government of Nigeria has made appreciable efforts to implement the Sendai framework for DRR 2030, exclusive of 4 priority areas and 7 targets.
He said the federal government has already set up a presidential committee to develop a comprehensive plan of action for preventing flooding and other related disasters in the country. In Abuja, Ilyasu Aliyakubu, NTA News.
The ECOWAS Disaster Operations Center has come on stream. Domiciled at the ECOWAS Commission Department of Humanitarian and Social Affairs, the center is to assist member states with disaster risk reduction management. Calvin Eunwai reports.
The Disaster Operations Center is a product of intense work involving the AU Commission, United Nations and ECOWAS agencies on climate change and environment. It is to coordinate all risk reduction activities, working closely with relevant agencies in member states. This is a step further in helping member states mitigate climate change impacts.
We in West Africa have been on the front lines confronting various hazards that have escalated into calamities, ranging from extreme weather conditions to infectious disease like Ebola and COVID-19. The ripple effects of this disaster have had an adverse impact on our economies and, most critically, our people.
The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, is delighted and expressed commitment to work closely with the center to set a template for regional operations. In Abuja, Calvin Ewonwaye, NTA News.
In Nigeria, the Day of the African Child is attracting more attention and support from governments and civil society organizations towards the need to provide improved learning and teaching environments and protection of the rights of children. Charles Alfa was at a primary school in Abuja, where some pupils and key players appealed for adequate care and their development in the fast-evolving world.
Day of the African Child brings back memories of the struggle by some students decades ago who protested against low standard of education in South Africa, bringing to bear the imperative of providing safe and conducive learning atmosphere for all concerned. At a model primary and junior secondary school in the FCT, the pupils showcased Nigeria's rich cultural values, their talents in book reading, quiz, and word renditions in commemoration of the day. In the midst of the euphoria, there is a need that cries out from the deep.
I want them to encourage the school more. I want them to give us more facilities for the school.
Project Hope Alive, the architect of the celebration in the school and critical stakeholders, made numerous donations and highlighted the importance of the day and what governments must do to revamp education.
We are using the Day of the African Child to highlight these issues and acknowledge the fact that the right of the child is a fundamental right.
And every other major stakeholder to come together and address our mind to issues affecting our children and see what we need to do most urgently to enhance their well-being.
I'm urging Senator Akpabio to look into the primary school issues.
So I think that every child sat here feels like today is a big day.
Rights of the African child in a digital environment is the focus. Charles Alpha, NTA News.
And that's the news at 7 on NTA International. Thank you for watching. I am Lami Ali. Hannah Olainka has been the sign language interpreter. Have a beautiful weekend.